Welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve while rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. This show is brought to you by a whole bunch of listeners this week. I suspect that these anxious times mean that my show is really helping people, so I've had a really good 2 weeks with a lot of support from some very kind folks. I've had a few new people sign up on the Patreon at the $5 level, so I'd like to thank Win, Nova, and also Kat Combs and Mikhaeil, who absolutely adorably listen to the show together at night, which I just love. I love that people can share sleepy time tales with each other. Thanks to all of you for signing up. I hope that you enjoy your bonuses. All of those folks get to hear the latest episode before everybody else. It's usually launched on the Thursday as opposed to the Sunday. They also get a weekly bonus mini-sode launched at the same time as that early release, and special edits of the main episode, and a postcard which will get sent to them when the post offices open again sometime in the future. I also had a very kind contribution via the tip jar on the website from Chris Brenner, and that is much appreciated as well. Thank you very much, Chris. So if you'd like to get a shout out on an episode and help to contribute to the running of the show, please consider joining the Patreon or using any one of the other methods to help support the show that are all listed in the show notes. There's the Patreon, the tip jar, the merchandise store, and others. So if you're inclined and would like to help and would help me keep the lights on, any help is much appreciated. Also, thanks to exchange rates, even a few dollars go quite a long way here, so any little bit really does help. And furthermore, if you're struggling mentally with stress and anxiety or anything else, give a try out to our sponsor, BetterHelp. They are a secure online therapy service with licensed professionals. Visit trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime. That's trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime. Or take a look at the link in the show notes to learn a little bit more. Sleepy Time Tales listeners get 10% off their first month if you sign up, so there is good advantage to you there. As always, I need to shout out to the music, which is Desire by Kumiko. The music is available on the Free Music Archive, and I've linked their website in the show notes, as they've got some very cool stuff which they release under various different names depending on the style that I definitely recommend checking out. Thank you for your time, and back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It's a bit of a strange idea, isn't it? A podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. I gave my parents sleepless nights for years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep was always a struggle for me. It was fairly late in life when I discovered the tendency for droning voices, especially male ones, to act like a tranquilizer for me. I used to listen to podcasts at night because I couldn't sleep, and I'd find myself waking up at the end, having fallen asleep and missed everything that I was trying to listen to. I started listening to some podcasts over and over again in order to help me sleep. And I eventually discovered that there are others out there for that purpose. There are people who tell stories and do what they can to help the sleepless and help people like me. But often when I recommended those to other people, they didn't quite get it. They didn't quite go for it. Often they didn't like the voices of the specific people in the podcast. And I realized that I'm actually someone with a boring, deep, drony voice. So maybe I can use that to help others, to help reach out and help people get a good night's sleep. And so I started Sleepy Time Tales myself. I actually didn't realize this until the other day that I missed the anniversary of this show. 7th of March, here I am like almost 2 months later, and it's like I passed a major milestone like that and didn't even realize it. And it's been a great year. Thank you for everyone who's stuck around since the beginning. I know it was a little ropey early on, and I know there were people listening regularly, so thank you very much. Now, every episode starts with this long intro. There are two purposes for it. For new listeners, I want to make the case for why you probably maybe find listening to Sleepy Time Tales helpful. And for older people, you already know why you're here, but for them, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create a new habit. Insomnia is a bad habit. It's a bad mental processes that keep us awake. And the best way to beat a bad habit is to create a new one. So what we do here at Sleepy Time Tales is try to create a new habit. So what we do here is, for the people who've been listening a while, this is the chance for them to start settling down. Brush your teeth, have a glass of water, make sure your room is warm but not too warm, because a slightly cooler environment's actually good for you to help you sleep. Cooler environment and wrap yourself up nice and tightly. That's kind of the ideal, so you can manage your temperature at night. That is their chance to start getting into the swing of it, start getting to the process, start building that space and building your nest. Now, for newer people, there are probably a couple of different ways to engage with the show. For me, when I listen to a sleep podcast, I need something to focus on. I need a story or an event that I can actually concentrate on, something to keep my mind on a specific point, to stop it spinning out into stress and anxiety. I need to focus just enough not to resist sleep when it comes for me. Some people, it may be something a little bit more primal. A lot of people these days need white noise. Sounds of sea, sound of the ocean, sounds of rain, or sometimes just a boring dude droning in the background. However you want to engage with the show and however it helps you is really up to you. Tonight's story for you to concentrate on is a sort of romance from the late 19th century. The story of a young woman who's not fitting in with a certain set in English life, and the attempts of her uncle to make her more of a lady. I haven't gotten very far, but it actually seems like quite a charming story, so it's something worth listening to. But the actual content of the story doesn't really matter. I like to pick something that's interesting enough for those who don't fall asleep immediately, but ultimately the point here is to just slowly focus on it and keep a light mental grip on it to allow sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I hope that you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but it's very important that you don't feel pressurized. It may not work on the first night. Maybe it'll take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. Maybe my accent is strange to you. If you're a first-time listener, I do recommend or request that you try and listen for at least 2 or 3 nights to see if the show works for you. It very well may not, but I think that whole thing about creating habits is important. Give yourself some time to get over the resistance and the strange sensation of listening to me here in your ears. For some people, maybe 1 episode isn't long enough. I'm regularly pushing an hour on episodes now, which was always what I wanted to do, but I just couldn't quite ever make it work out. And that gives you plenty of time to sleep. There's with very little pressure, but sometimes you may need more. What I do as well is, because I wake up at 3 in the morning, I actually just let my shows run constantly. I keep about like a night's worth of episodes of every show that I listen to downloaded, and then I start with the latest one and then let them go. I wake up at 3 a.m. and I'll pop my earbuds back in if they've fallen out, and I let the voices waft me back to sleep. Sometimes I even wake up like 30 minutes before my alarm. I usually just carry on listening and fall back asleep again. It may seem a little bit pointless to do that. Why would you bother to go back to sleep 30 minutes before the alarm? But I can tell you now that that is often the best part of my night. There's just something about it that is deeply satisfying on a very primal level. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I'll tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life in a small way. Or is it a small way? Maybe it's not so small. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes life harder. So I'm here to do my small part, to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. We live in an unkind age with unkind people, and I want to be kind to you. I want to share my kindness with you, and I need you to be kind to yourself. There's no point in me trying to help you if you can't do that for yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Don't rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep, and the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath, forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. The intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling that we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep into a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and supposed progress that shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. Of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Love Works Wonders, a novel by Charlotte M. Brame. O you that have the charge of love, keep him in rosy bondage bound, as in the fields of bliss above he sits with flowerets fettered round. Loose not a tie that round him clings, nor ever let him use his wings, or even an hour, a minute's flight, will rob the plumes of half their light. Moore. To the readers of the New York Weekly, who for nearly 20 years have stood faithfully by us, cheering us in our labors and bidding us Godspeed, to whom our pet journal has become a household word and without whose aid we could have accomplished nothing, this volume is respectfully dedicated by the publishers, Street and Smith. Chapter 1. A girl with a character. It was a strange place for an intelligence office, yet Madame Cellini evidently knew what she was doing when she established her office in an aristocratic neighborhood, and actually next door to the family mansion of the Countess Dowager of Bearwood. The worthy Countess was shocked and, taking counsel of her hopes, predicted that Madame Cellini's institution would soon prove a failure. Notwithstanding this prediction, the agency prospered, and among its patrons were many of the nobility. One fine morning in May, a carriage stopped before Madame Cellini's door, and from it descended a handsome, aristocratic gentleman, evidently of the old school. There was some little commotion in the interior of the building, and then a foot-page appeared to whom Sir Oswald Darrell, for that was the gentleman's name, gave his card. "I am here by appointment," he said, "to see Madame Cellini." He was ushered into a handsomely furnished room, where in a few minutes he was joined by Madame Cellini herself, a quick, bright French woman, whose dark eyes seemed to embrace everything in their comprehensive glance. Sir Oswald bowed with stately courtesy and quaint old-fashioned grace. "Have you been so fortunate, madame, as to find that which I am in search of?" he inquired. "I think you will be pleased, Sir Oswald." "Nay, I am sure you will," answered the lady. "I have a lady waiting to see you now, who will prove, I should say, a treasure." Sir Oswald bowed, and Madame continued. "Miss Agnes Hastings, has been for the last 6 years furnishing governess at Lady Castledean's, and her 2 pupils make their debut this year, so that there is no longer any occasion for her services." "And you think she would be fitted, madame, to occupy the position for which I require a lady of talent and refinement?" "I am sure of it," replied madame. "Miss Hastings is 30 years of age. She is highly accomplished, and her manners are exceedingly ladylike. She is a person of great refinement. Moreover, she has had great experience with young girls. I do not think, Sir Oswald, that you could do better." "Is the lady here? Can I see her?" Madame Cellini rang and desired the little page to ask Miss Hastings to come to her. In a few minutes, an elegant, well-dressed lady entered the room. She advanced with a quiet grace and dignity that seemed natural to her. There was not the slightest trace of awkwardness or mauvais honte in her manner. Madame Cellini introduced her to Sir Oswald Darrell. "I will leave you," she said, "to discuss your private arrangements." Madame quitted the room with gliding subtle grace, and then Sir Oswald, in his courtly fashion, placed a chair for Miss Hastings. He looked at the pale, clear-cut face for a few minutes in silence, as though he were at a loss what to say, and then he commenced suddenly. "I suppose Madame Cellini has told you what I want, Miss Hastings?" "Yes," was the quiet reply. "Your niece has been neglected, and you want someone to take the entire superintendence of her." "Neglected?" exclaimed Sir Oswald. "My dear madam, that is a mild word which does not express the dreadful reality. I wish to disguise nothing from you. I assure you, she literally horrifies me." Miss Hastings smiled. "Neglected," he repeated. "The girl is a savage, a splendid savage, nothing more nor less." "Has she not received any kind of training then, Sir Oswald?" "Training? Dear madame, can you imagine what a wild vine is? A vine that has never been cultivated or pruned, but allowed to grow wild in all its natural beauty and strength, to cling where it would, to trail on the ground and to twine around forest trees. Such a vine is a fit type of my niece." Miss Hastings looked slightly bewildered. Here was a very different pupil from the elegant, graceful daughters of the Lady Castledene. "I should perhaps," continued Sir Oswald, "explain to you the peculiar position that my niece, Miss Pauline Darrell, has occupied." His grand old face flushed and his stately head was bowed as though some of the memories that swept over him were not free from shame. And then, with the little gesture of his white hand, on which shone a large diamond ring, he said, "There is no need for me to tell you, Miss Hastings, that the Darrells are one of the oldest families in England. Ancient, honourable, and I must confess proud. Very proud. My father, the late Sir Hildebert Darrell, was, I should say, one of the proudest and most reserved of men. He had but 2 children, myself and a daughter 12 years younger, my sister Felicia. I was educated abroad. It was one of my father's fancies that I should see many lands, that I should study men and women before settling down to my right position in the world, so that I knew but little of my sister Felicia. She was a child when I left home. The tragedy of her life had happened before I returned. Again, a great rush of colour came over the pale aristocratic face. I must apologize, Miss Hastings, for troubling you with these details, but unless you understand them, you will not understand my niece. I cannot tell you how it happened, but it did so happen that while I was away, my sister disgraced herself. She left home with a French artist whom Sir Hildebert had engaged to renovate some choice and costly pictures at Darrell Court. How it came about, I cannot say. Perhaps there were excuses for her. She may have found home very dull. My father was harsh and cold, and her mother was dead. It may be that when the young artist told her of warm love and sunny lands, she was tempted, poor child, to leave the paternal roof. My father's wrath was terrible. He pursued Julian Lestrange with unrelenting fury. I believe the man would have been a successful artist but for my father, who had vowed to ruin him, and who never rested until he had done so. Until he had reduced him to direst poverty, and then my sister appealed for help, and my father refused to grant it. He would not allow her name to be mentioned among us. Her portrait was destroyed. Everything belonging to her was sent away from Darrell Court. When I returned, in an interview that I shall never forget, my father threatened me not only with disinheritance, but with his curse, if I made any attempt to hold the least communication with my sister. I do not know that I should have obeyed him, if I could have found her. But I did not even know what part of the world she was in. She died, poor girl, and I have no doubt that her death was greatly hastened by privation. My father told me of her death, also that she had left one daughter. He did more. He wrote to Julian Lestrange and offered to adopt his daughter on the one condition that he would consent never to see her or hold the least communication with her. The reply was, as you may imagine, a firm refusal and a fierce denunciation. In the same letter came a note, written in large childish hand. I love my papa, and I do not love you. I will not come to live with you. You are a cruel man, and you helped kill my dear mamma. It was a characteristic little note, and it was signed Pauline Lestrange. My father's anger on receiving it was very great. I confess that I was more amused than angry. My father, Miss Hastings, lived to a good old age. I was not a young man when I succeeded him. He left me all his property. You must understand that the Darrell and Audley royal estates are not entailed. He made no mention in his will of the only grandchild he had, but after I arranged all my affairs, I resolved to find her. For 10 years I've been doing all I could, sending to France, Italy, Spain, and every country where I thought it possible that the artist might have sought refuge. 3 months since I received a letter from him, written on his deathbed, asking me to do something for Pauline, who had grown up into a beautiful girl of 17. I found then that he had been living for some years in the Rue d'Homme in Paris. I buried him, brought his daughter to England, and made arrangements whereby she should assume the name of Darrell. But I little knew what a task I had undertaken. Pauline ought to be my heiress, Miss Hastings. She ought to succeed me at Darrell Court. I have no other relatives, but, well, I will not despair. You will see what can be done with her. What are her deficiencies? Asked Miss Hastings. Sir Oswald raised his white hands with a gesture of despair. I will tell you briefly. She has lived among artists. She does not seem to have ever known any of her own sex. She is, I'm sorry to use the word, a perfect bohemian. Whether she can be transformed into anything faintly resembling a lady, I cannot tell. Will you undertake the task, Miss Hastings? She looked very thoughtful for some minutes, and then answered, I will do my best, Sir Oswald. Thank you very much. You must permit me to name liberal terms, for your task will be no light one. And the interview ended, to their mutual satisfaction. Chapter 2. Darrell Court is a prison to me. It was a beautiful May day, bright with fresh spring loveliness. The leaves were springing fresh and green from the trees. The hedges were all abloom with pink hawthorn. The chestnut trees were all in flower, the gold of the laburnum, the purple of the lilac, the white of the fair acacia trees, and the delicate green of the stately elms and limes gave a beautiful variety of colour. The grass was dotted with 100 wild flowers. Great clusters of yellow buttercups looked in the distance like the upspreading of a sea of gold. The violets perfumed the air, the bluebells stirred in the sweet spring breeze, and the birds sang out loudly and jubilantly. If one spot looked more lovely than the other on this bright May day, it was Darrell Court, for it stood where the sun shone brightest, in one of the most romantic and picturesque nooks of England, the part of Woodshire bordering on the sea. The mansion and estates stood on gently rising ground. A chain of purple hills stretched away into the far distance. Then came the pretty town of Audley Royal, the Audley Woods, and the broad, deep river Dart. The bank of the river formed the boundary of the Darrell estates, a rich and magnificent heritage, wherein every beauty of meadow and a wood seemed to meet. The park was rich in its stately trees and herds of deer, and not far from the house was a firwood, an aromatic, odorous firwood, which led to the very shores of the smiling southern sea. By night and by day the grand music of nature was heard in perfection at Darrell Court. Sometimes it was the roll of the wind across the hills, or the beat of angry waves on the shore, or the wild melody of the storm among the pine trees, or the full chorus of 1,000 feathered songsters. The court itself was one of the most picturesque of mansions. It did not belong to any one order or style of architecture. There was nothing stiff or formal about it, but it looked in that bright May sunshine a noble edifice, with its square towers covered in clinging ivy, grey turrets and large arched windows. Did the sun ever shine upon such a combination of colours? The spray of the fountains glittered in the air. The numerous balconies were filled with flowers. Wherever it was possible for a flower to take root, one had been placed to grow. Purple wisterias, sad, solemn passion flowers, roses of every hue. The star-like jessamine and scarlet creepers gave to the walls of the old mansion a vivid glow of colour. Gold and purple enriched the gardens. White, heavy lilies breathed faintest perfume. The spot looked like a very Eden. The grand front entrance consisted of a large Gothic porch, which was reached by a broad flight of steps, adorned with white marble vases filled with flowers. The first terrace was immediately below, and terrace led from terrace down to the grand old gardens where sweetest blossoms grew. There was an old-world air about the place, something patrician, quiet, reserved. It was no vulgar haunt for vulgar crowds. It was not a show place, and the master of it, Sir Oswald Darrell, as he stood upon the terrace, looked in keeping with the surroundings. There was a distinct air about Sir Oswald, an old-fashioned courtly dignity which never for one moment left him. He was thoroughly well bred. He had not two sets of manners, one for the world and one for private life. He was always the same, measured in speech, noble in his grave condescension. No man ever more thoroughly deserved the name of aristocrat. He was delicate and fastidious, with profound and deeply rooted dislike for all that was ill-bred, vulgar, or mean. Even in his dress, Sir Oswald was remarkable. The superfine white linen, the diamond studs and sleeve links, the rare jewels that gleamed on his fingers, all struck the attention. And as he took from his pocket a richly engraved golden snuff-box and tapped it with the ends of his delicate white fingers, there stood revealed a thorough aristocrat, the ideal of an English patrician gentleman. Sir Oswald walked around the stately terraces and gardens. I do not see her, he said to himself, yet most certainly Frampton told me she was here. Then with his heavy gold-headed cane in hand, Sir Oswald descended to the gardens. He was evidently in search of someone. Meeting one of the gardeners who stood hand in hand as he passed by, Sir Oswald asked, "Have you seen Miss Darrell in the gardens?" "I saw Miss Darrell in the fernery some 5 minutes since, Sir Oswald," was the reply. Sir Oswald drew from his pocket a very fine white handkerchief, and diffused an agreeable odour of millefeuille around him. The gardener had been near the stables, and Sir Oswald was fastidious. A short walk brought him to the fernery, an exquisite combination of rock and rustic work, arched by a dainty green roof, and made musical by the ripple of a little waterfall. Sir Oswald looked in cautiously, evidently rather in dread of what he might find there. Then his eyes fell upon something, and he said, "Pauline, are you there?" A rich, clear, musical voice answered, "Yes, I am here, uncle." "My dear," continued Sir Oswald, half timidly, not advancing a step further into the grotto, "may I ask what you are doing?" "Certainly, uncle," was the cheerful reply. "You may ask by all means. The difficulty is to answer, for I am really doing nothing, and I do not know how to describe nothing." "Why did you come hither?" he asked. "To dream," replied the musical voice. "I think the sound of falling water is the sweetest music in the world. I came here to enjoy it and to dream over it." Sir Oswald looked very uncomfortable. "Considering, Pauline, how much you have been neglected, do you not think you might spend your time more profitably? In educating yourself, for example?" "This is educating myself. I am teaching myself beautiful thoughts, and nature just now is my singing mistress." And then the speaker's voice suddenly changed and a ring of passion came into it. "Who says that I have been neglected? When you say that, you speak ill of my dear dead father, and no one shall do that in my presence. You speak slander, and slander ill becomes an English gentleman. If I was neglected when my father was alive, I wish to goodness such neglect were my portion now." Sir Oswald shrugged his shoulders. "Each one to his or her taste, Pauline. With very little more of such neglect, you would have been a—" He paused. Perhaps some instinct of prudence warned him. "A what?" she demanded scornfully. "Pray finish the sentence, Sir Oswald." "My dear, you are too impulsive, too hasty. You want more quietness of manner, more dignity." Her voice deepened in its tones as she asked, "I should have been a what, Sir Oswald? I never begin a sentence and leave it half finished. You surely are not afraid to finish it." "No, my dear," was the calm reply. "There was never yet a Darrell afraid of anything on earth. If you particularly wish me to do so, I will finish what I was about to say. You would have been a confirmed Bohemian, and nothing could have made you a lady." "I love what you call Bohemians, and I detest what you call ladies, Sir Oswald," was the angry retort. "Most probably. But then you see, Pauline, the ladies of the House of Darrell have always been ladies. High-bred, elegant women. I doubt if any of them knew what the word Bohemian meant." She laughed a little scornful laugh, which yet was sweet and clear as the sound of silver bells. "I had almost forgotten," said Sir Oswald. "I came to speak to you about something. Pauline, will you come into the house with me?" They walked on together in silence for some minutes, and then Sir Oswald began. "I went to London, as you know, last week, Pauline, and my errand was on your behalf." She raised her eyebrows, but did not deign to ask any questions. "I have engaged a lady to live with us here at Darrell Court, whose duties will be to finish your education. Or rather, I may truthfully say, to begin it. To train you in the habits of refined society, to make you presentable, in fact, Pauline, which I am sorry, really sorry to say you are not at present." She made him a low bow, a bow full of defiance and rebellion. I am indeed indebted to you, Sir Oswald. No trifling, said the stately baronet. No sarcasm, Pauline. But listen to me. You are not without sense or reason. Pray attend. Look around you, he continued. Remember that the broad, fair lands of Darrell Court form one of the grandest domains in England. It is an inheritance almost royal in its extent and magnificence. Whoso reigns here as king or queen of half a county is looked up to, respected, honoured, admired, and imitated. The owner of Darrell Court is a power even in this powerful land of ours. Men and women look up to such a one for guidance and example. Judge then what the owner of the inheritance should be. The baronet's grand old face was flushed with emotion. He must be pure, or he would make immorality the fashion. Honourable, because men will take their notions of honour from him. Just that justice may abound, upright, stainless. You see all that, Pauline? Yes, she assented quickly. No men have so much to answer for, continued Sir Oswald, as the great ones of the land. Men in whose hands power is vested, men to whom others look for example, on whose lives others are modelled. Men who, as it were, carry the minds, if not the souls, of their fellow men in the hollows of their hands. Pauline looked more impressed and insensibly drew nearer to him. Such men, I thank heaven, he said, standing bareheaded as he uttered the words, have the Darrells been. Loyal, upright, honest, honourable, of stainless repute, of stainless life, fitted to rule their fellow men, grand men, sprung from a grand old race. And at times women have reigned here, women whose names live in the annals of the land, who have been as shining lights from the purity, the refinement, the grandeur of their lives. He spoke with a passion of eloquence not lost on the girl by his side. I, he continued humbly, am one of the least worthy of my race. I have done nothing for its advancement, but at the same time I have done nothing to disgrace it. I have carried on the honours passively. The time is coming when Darrell Court must pass into other hands. Now, Pauline, you have heard. You know what the ruler of Darrell Court should be. Tell me, are you fitted to take your place here? I am very young, she murmured. It is not a question of youth. Dame Sabella Darrell reigned here when she was only 18, and the sons she trained to succeed her were among the greatest statesmen England has ever known. She improved and enlarged the property. She died after living here 60 years, beloved, honoured, and revered. It is not a question of age. I am a Darrell, said the girl proudly. Yes, you have the face and figure of a Darrell, you bear the name too, but you have not the grace and manner of a Darrell. Those are mere outward matters of polish and veneer, she said impatiently. Nay, not so. You would not think it right to see such an unformed, untrained, uneducated, ignorant girl at the head of such a house as this. What did you do yesterday? A maid displeased you. You boxed her ears. Just imagine it. Such a proceeding on the part of the mistress of Darrell Court would fill one with horror. A slight smile rippled over the full crimson lips. Queen Elizabeth boxed her courtier's ears, said the girl, and it seemed right to her. A queen, Pauline, is hedged in by her own royalty. She may do what she will. The very fact that you are capable of defending an action so violent, so unladylike, so opposed to all one's ideas of feminine delicacy, proves that you are unfit for the position you ought to occupy. I am honest, at least. I make no pretensions to be what I am not. So is my butler honest, but that does not fit him to be master of Darrell Court. Honesty is but one quality, a good one, sturdy and strong. It requires not one, but many qualities to hold such a position as I would fain have you occupy. Miss Darrell's patience was evidently at an end. And the upshot of all this, Sir Oswald, is exactly so, that I am anxious to give you every chance in my power, that I found an inestimable, refined, elegant woman who will devote her time and talents to train you and fit you for society. A low musical laugh broke from the perfect lips. Have you any idea, she asked, what I shall be like when I am trained? Like a lady, I trust. A well-bred lady. I can imagine nothing more beautiful than that. When is she coming, this model of yours, Sir Oswald? Now your model niece, not mine. She is here now, and I wish to introduce her to you. I should like you, if possible, to make a favourable impression on her. There was another impatient murmur. I wish you to understand, Pauline, he resumed after a short pause, that I shall expect you to render the most implicit obedience to Miss Hastings, to follow whatever rules she may lay down for you, to attend to your studies as she directs them, to pay the greatest heed to all her corrections, to copy her style, to imitate her manners, I hate her, was the impetuous outburst. I would sooner be a beggar all my life than submit to such restraint. Very well, returned Sir Oswald calmly. I know that arguing with you is time lost. The choice lies with yourself. If you decide to do as I wish, to study to become a lady in the truest sense of the word, if you will fit yourself for the position, you shall be the heiress of Darrell Court. If not, if you persist in your present unladylike, unrefined bohemian manner, I shall leave the whole property to someone else. I tell you the plain truth without any disguise. I do not want Darrell Court, she cried passionately. It is a prison to me. I excuse you, rejoined Sir Oswald coldly. You are excited and so not answerable for what you say. Uncle, said the girl, did you see that beautiful singing bird there, giving voice to such glorious melody? Do you think you could catch it and put it in a cage? I have no doubt that I could, replied Sir Oswald. But if you did, she persisted, even suppose you could make it forget its own wild melodies, could you teach it to sing formally by notes and at your will? I have never supposed anything of the kind, said Sir Oswald. You are possessed of far too much of that kind of nonsense. The young ladies of the present day, properly educated girls, do not talk in that way. I can easily believe it, she returned bitterly. Miss Hastings is in the library, said Sir Oswald, as they entered the house. I hope to see you receive her kindly. Put away that frown, Pauline, and smile if you can. Remember it is characteristic of the Darrells to be gracious to strangers. With these words, Sir Oswald opened the library door, and holding his niece's hand, entered the room. Miss Hastings rose to receive them. He led Pauline to her, and in the kindest manner possible, introduced them to each other. I will leave you together, he said. Pauline will show you her rooms, Miss Hastings, and I hope that you will soon feel happy and quite at home with us. Sir Oswald quitted the library, leaving the two ladies looking in silence at each other. Chapter 3. Your good society is all deceit. Miss Hastings had been prepared to see a hoyden, an awkward, unfledged schoolgirl, one who, never having seen much of good society, had none of the little graces and charms that distinguish young ladies. She had expected to see a tall, gaunt girl with red hands and a general air of not knowing what to do with herself. That was the idea she had formed. She gazed in wonder at the reality. A magnificent figure, a girl whose grand, pale, statuesque beauty was something that could never be forgotten. There was nothing of the boarding school young lady about her, no quiet graces. She was simply magnificent. No other word could describe her. Miss Hastings, as she looked at her, thought involuntarily of the graceful lines, the beautiful curves, the grand, free grace of the world-renowned Diana of the Louvre. There was the same arched, graceful neck, the same royal symmetry, the same harmony of outline. In one of the most celebrated art galleries of Rome, Miss Hastings remembered to have seen a superb bust of Juno. As she looked at her new pupil, she could almost fancy that its head had been modelled from hers. Pauline's head was royal in its queenly contour, the brow low, white and rounded at the temples, The hair, waving in lines of inexpressible beauty, was loosely gathered together and fastened behind with a gleaming silver arrow. The eyes were perhaps the most wonderful feature in that wonderful face. They were dark as night itself, somewhat in hue like a purple heartsease, rich, soft, dreamy, yet at times all fire, all brightness, filled with passion, more than intense than any words, and shining then with a strange half-golden light. The brows were straight, dark and beautiful, the lips crimson, full and exquisitely shaped. The mouth looked like one that could persuade or contemn, that could express tenderness or scorn, love or pride, with the slightest play of the lips. Every attitude the girl assumed was full of unconscious grace. She did not appear to be in the least conscious of her wonderful beauty. She had walked to the window and stood leaning carelessly against the frame, one beautiful arm thrown above her head as though she were weary and would fain rest, an attitude that could not have been surpassed had she studied it for years. "You are not at all what I expected to see," said Miss Hastings at last. "You are indeed so different that I am taken by surprise." "Am I better or worse than you imagined me?" she asked with careless scorn. "You're different. Better perhaps in some things. You're taller. You're so tall that it'll be difficult to remember you're a pupil." "The Darrells are a tall race," she said quietly. "Miss Hastings, what have you come here to teach me?" The elder lady rose from her seat and looked lovingly into the face of the girl. She placed her hand caressingly on the slender shoulders. "I know what I should like to teach you, Miss Darrell, if you will let me. I should like to teach you your duty to heaven, your fellow creatures, and yourself." "That would be dry learning, I fear," she returned. "What does my uncle wish me to learn?" "To be in all respects a perfectly refined, graceful lady." Her face flushed with a great crimson wave that rose to the white brow and delicate shell-like ears. "I shall never be that," she cried passionately. "I may as well just give up all hopes of Darrell Court. I have seen some ladies since I've been here. I could not be like them. They seem to speak by rule. They all say the same kind of things with the same smiles and the same tone of voice. They follow each other like sheep. They seem frightened to advance an opinion of their own, or even give utterance to an original thought. They look upon me as something horrible because I dare to say what I think. And I have read every book I could find. It is not always best to put our thoughts in speech, and the chances are, Miss Darrell, that if you have read every book you could find, you have read many that would have been better left alone. You are giving a one-sided, prejudiced view after all." She raised her beautiful head with a gesture of superb disdain. "It is the same difference between them and myself as between a mechanical singing bird made to sing 3 tunes and a wild sweet bird of the woods. I like my own self best." "There is not the least doubt of that," observed Miss Hastings with a smile. "But the question is not so much what we like ourselves as what others like in us. However, we will discuss that at another time, Miss Darrell. Has my uncle told you that if I please him, if I can be moulded into the right form, I am to be heiress of Darrell Court?" she asked quickly. "Yes, and now that I've seen you, I am persuaded that you can be anything you wish." "Do you think then that I am clever?" she asked eagerly. "I should imagine so," replied Miss Hastings. "Pauline, I need not call you Miss Darrell. I hope we shall be friends. I trust that we shall be happy together." "It is not very likely," she said slowly, "that I can like you, Miss Hastings." "Why not?" asked the governess, astonished at her frankness. "Because you are to correct me. Continued correction will be a great annoyance and will prevent my really liking you." Miss Hastings looked astounded. "That may be, Pauline," she said, "but do you know that it is not polite for you to say so? In good society, one does not tell such unpleasant truths." "That's just it," was the eager retort. "That is why I do not like good society and shall never be fit for it. I am truthful by nature. In my father's house and among his friends, there was never any need to conceal the truth. We always spoke frankly. If we did not like each other, we said so. But here, it seems to me, the first lesson learned to fit one for society is to speak falsely. Not so, Pauline. But when the truth is likely to hurt another's feelings, to wound susceptibility or pride, why speak it unless it is called for? Pauline moved her white arms in a superb gesture of scorn. I would rather any day hear the truth and have my mind hurt, she said energetically, than feel that people were smiling at me and deceiving me. Lady Hampton visits Sir Oswald. I do not like her, and she does not like me. But she always asks Sir Oswald how his dear niece is, and she calls me a sweet creature, original but very sweet. You can see for yourself, Miss Hastings, that I am not that. Indeed, you're not sweet, returned the governess, smiling. But Pauline, you're a mimic, and mimicry is a dangerous gift. She had imitated Lady Hampton's languid tones and affected accent to perfection. Sir Oswald bows and smiles all the time Lady Hampton is talking to him. He stands first upon one foot and then upon the other. You would think, to listen to him, that he was so charmed with her ladyship that he could not exist out of her presence. Yet I have seen him quite delighted at her departure, and twice I heard him say, "Thank heaven." It was for the relief. Your good society is all deceit, Miss Hastings. I will not have you say that, Pauline. Amiability and the desire always to be kind and considerate may carry one to extreme at times, but I am inclined to prefer the amiability that spares to the truth that wounds. I am not, was the blunt rejoinder. Will you come to your rooms, Miss Hastings? Sir Oswald has ordered a suite to be prepared entirely for our use. I have 3 rooms, you have 4. There is a study that we can use together. They went through the broad stately corridors where the warm sun shone in the windows and the flowers breathed sweetest perfume. The rooms that had been prepared for them were bright and pleasant with a beautiful view from the windows, well furnished and supplied with every comfort. A sigh came from Miss Hastings as she gazed. It was all so pleasant. But it seemed very doubtful to her whether she would remain or not. Very doubtful whether she would be able to make what Sir Oswald desired out of that frank, free-spoken girl who had not one conventional idea. Sir Oswald is very kind, she said at length, looking around her. These rooms are exceedingly nice. They are nice, said Pauline, but I was happier with my father in the Rue d'Orme. Ah me, what liberty we had there. In this stately life I feel as though I were bound with cords or shackled with chains, as though I longed to stretch out my arms and fly away. Again Miss Hastings sighed, for it seemed to her that the time of her residence at Darrell Court would in all probability be very short. And that's it for tonight. As always, the stories that I read out can be found on Project Gutenberg at the link that is in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, a podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes are released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiko. Check out more of their website, which you will find linked in the show notes. Good night and sweet dreams.